The trial captivating a nation.
Read is accused of killing her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The defense claims she was framed in a police cover-up.
On the scene to keep you informed at every turn.
In Dedham, Katie Benoit, NBC 10 News.
With live updates and legal analysis.
What happens then? Does the trial have to stop?
A lawyer's only as good as his or her word.
They failed miserably and they'll continue to fail.
On air, online, and on the app. NBC 10 News has the latest on the retrial of Karen Read.
We do, and we continue our daily debriefings right after court action is over. Today, the jury wasn't in court. Closing arguments tomorrow, and then after that, they start to deliberate. Let's go to NBC 10's Katie Benoit. She was up at the courthouse today. She's back with us in-house tonight. Katie, what did they call today's session? This is setting up whatever's going to come tomorrow, and they had to make a few decisions, correct?
Yes, so a couple of things were talked about today, especially the jury instructions, what the jury is going to be told tomorrow before they start to look at evidence and before they deliberate. So there were some questions. Both sides had submitted proposed jury instructions that they wanted. So the judge basically went over both sides, what they had proposed. And there was a couple of things that came up too, just about the defense. They're not going to use a third-party culprit defense. Instead, they're going to use a Bowden defense, which is basically saying they're alleging the police investigation was inadequate in this case, but they're not going to use a third-party culprit, which came up today because those are instructions the judge has to give the jury. So she'll give them a Bowden instruction, but not a third-party culprit instruction. Because
let's just make that real. Mojita, you come in and help us with this. Let's make that easy. A third-party culprit means I didn't do it, somebody else in that house did it, versus the police screwed this whole thing up, correct? They're going with the latter.
Absolutely. And I think the reason why they have to go with the latter is because, remember, their case in chief, even though they said it was going to be robust, they didn't call anyone of the Alberts or the Higgins to the stand. So really, they can't point to any of the third-party culprit information because they didn't present any of that information at trial. So they really are left with the Bowden defense instruction being given to the jury. But as Judge Cannone said, they can mention the fact that the police did not investigate any of the Higgins or Alberts, but they can't actually go into the why details and why they're blaming other people, just basically focusing on the investigation piece only.
Okay, the judge also made a ruling on a PowerPoint presentation that some of the accident reconstruction experts presented. Now, just clarify for my memory, did the jury see the PowerPoint already, Katie?
Yes, they did. They saw the PowerPoint.
Okay, so Morgietta, they're being asked to unring the bell.
So I think so again, the jury is going to get a number of documents when they go back to deliberation. I think the question is whether or not they get the raw information or only what was actually presented at trial. Usually when you prepare for a trial, you would prepare snippets of what you're going to present in your trial, and then you would have a separate device or folder, whatever the case may be, as to all of the information. So I think that the crux of what is being determined is, are they going to be prejudiced by seeing other things that weren't actually presented to them in evidence, which is a huge issue because they already have a lot of evidence to decide on. So are they going to be influenced either way?
How aware do you think the jury is that the lead investigator, Proctor, wasn't called? How aware is the jury that witnesses from the first trial were called but weren't called this time? I mean, I know they're only supposed to consider what's in front of them, but certainly that comes into play. Do they know about this, Morgietta?
So from my memory during the jury voir dire and jury selection, I remember that a lot of the jurors actually did hear about the first trial, but despite all of that, they wanted to sit on this jury anyways. And as we all know, they're instructed every single day not to do their own independent research. But it would be really, really hard pressed to find some people on the jury that don't know about the first trial, that don't know about Trooper Proctor. It's hard, right? And throughout the trial, Trooper Proctor's name has been mentioned here and there, even though he wasn't called. I'm sure they're very aware of it, but they have a really hard job, and they only can decide on what the evidence was in this trial and what was presented this time around. And that's really, really tough for them. But again, they're not supposed to consider any other outside factors, including information from the first trial.
All right. Katie, Judge Cannone gave the plan for tomorrow. You just outlined what the plan is, and then we'll hear from the judge.
So the plan is closing statements. The jury is actually going to get there early tomorrow. They're bussed in from an undisclosed location, so they're going to get to that location early. And then the judge wants everyone at court by 8:45. So these closing arguments can go off right at 9 o'clock or maybe even before then, she said. So those will happen. There will be a short break for lunch, jury instructions, and then the jury is going to get the case. But tonight, the court guards are going to call the jury and see if they can stay till 5:30 tomorrow. So court will go a little bit longer tomorrow. The judge really wants to get this case in the hands of the jury. At the beginning of the week, she kind of was talking about how she sensed they were frustrated. So I think she really wants them to start deliberating and have time, not just an hour or so, but have a little bit of time before they go home for the weekend.
Okay, Morgiana, 3 parts to tomorrow, right? There's closing arguments from both sides, 1, 2, and then the judge charges the jury, gives them instructions. Both sides get an hour and 15 minutes each. I don't know how long she's going to go. Does this sound right to you? And then tomorrow, like the deliberations, if we have time?
Especially if the court and everybody agrees, including the jurors, to go a little bit past 4:30. It sounds like they can get the jury in the evidence to them so they can start deliberating at least this afternoon, and then obviously on through the weekend. The jury charge instructions, just so that people know, can go anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, especially when you have all these particularized instructions that each side wants the judge to instruct the jury on. So jury charge and jury conferences with the jurors is actually quite some time. So we were looking at least 3 to 4 hours with arguments on both sides and the jury instruction plus lunch. So a long day.
And then they're going to work through the weekend. Is that the plan, Katie?
Nope. So they'll have on Saturday.
Weekend off?
Yep. And
weekend
then they'll
off.
come back Monday. Yes.
Okay. All right. This is Judge Cannone on the plan for tomorrow as she sees it. Play it.
Ask if the court officers to call the jurors and ask them 2 things. To ask them if they can get here a little bit earlier so that we can all be in the courtroom at 8:45 ready to start. So things take a little while generally. That will assure us the closing arguments will start right at 9, maybe a few minutes earlier. The goal would be to hear arguments from both counsel and then take an early lunch break. I would ask that counsel plan on just a half an hour lunch break. I'd like, the point being, I want the jurors to start deliberating. I don't want to end the charge and send them home for the weekend. That's not fair after they've waited so long. So a short lunch, you're free to stay in the building and court officers will help you with accommodations for that. But a short lunch, and then I'll come out and do the charge. And then at least, hopefully, there'll be some time for them to deliberate. I'm going to ask the court officers to call the jurors to see if they can stay as late as 5 o'clock or 5:30 tomorrow night. I just don't think it's fair after they've sat through so much of this trial with the various delays that we've had to not let them start deliberating.
Okay, so let's just recap. The jury wasn't there today. They come back tomorrow. Today we planned what's allowed with closing arguments, what's not, how the judge will charge. The judge said you can't put the PowerPoint as evidence for them to go over and deliberate. That's being left out, not necessarily on Ring the Bell. They heard it already. They're just not going to have it in front of them. Tomorrow we have 3 parts: closing on the defense, closing on the state, the judge charges, and then it looks like they're going to get to work. And I don't know that we're going to get a surprise tomorrow, but this is going to go into next week, perhaps. That it seems to be the most logical thing. Morgiana, anything to add before we hear from Karen Read outside court?
No, I think it's just going to, people are just kind of depending on when the jury is going to come out. We never know. This could go on for 2 days. Last year, I think when we had this trial, it was 5 days, right? And that was a much lengthier trial. So it's just going to be a waiting game after tomorrow.
Okay. Katie, anything you want to add before we let Karen Read get the last word? She was outside court.
Yeah, we don't know when a verdict is going to come. Probably won't come Friday, but maybe next week. We're going to be in the courtroom next week, so we'll have eyes on the jury. And, when they come in with that verdict, we'll be there. If it happens Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll be there. Thursday, there's no court next week, just noting that. But Friday, there will be court.
Okay, let's hear Karen Read outside court today. We'll give her the last word. It's her case.
And how we feel on the eve of closing.
How important is that to have that verdict slip right?
Very important, as I learned the hard way.
You didn't have a chance to talk. You didn't testify this time. You didn't testify. You okay? Careful. You didn't testify, Karen. What would you have said to the jury if you didn't have a chance to testify? I guess nothing.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Why have you decided to?
I think it was you didn't testify. What would you have said? Thank you all. Thank you all. All right, that does it for our daily debrief. Thanks for being with us. Watch the complete coverage on the news on our later broadcast tonight. For now, I'm Gene Valicenti, NBC 10 News.
The trial captivating a nation.
John O'Keefe's niece testified. The juvenile recalled Reed and O'Keefe fighting in the weeks leading up to the Boston police officer's death.
There was a trip to Aruba where Karen Reed accused O'Keefe of kissing another woman, and there was a big argument. She said that things got progressively worse after that. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of voice raising.
The prosecution is trying to establish the fact that there was tenseness between John O'Keefe and Karen Reed.
NBC 10 News has the latest on the retrial of Karen Reed.